customer service, done right, can be your company's single biggest competitive advantage. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution. Join customer service authority and best-selling author John DiJulius as he interviews leaders who are revolutionizing their industries. This is more than a podcast, though. It's a movement. The Customer Service Revolution is a radical overthrow of conventional business mentality designed to transform what customers and employees experience. If you're a revolutionary customer service leader who's ready to stop competing on price and obsessed with building a brand that people cannot live without, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. This week, John talks with Jess Pettitt, an author, speaker, and diversity and inclusion specialist. Though often referred to as a thought leader, Jess responds that she just makes leaders think. In this episode, you'll learn how Jess went from performing stand-up in New York City to working as a diversity and inclusion expert. How Jess believes to thrive in this world, you have to ride two horses at once, one of humility and one of ego. For diversity, equity, and inclusion to stick, the first step is a conversation that matters about what you don't know, how to avoid your blind spots, what good enough now means, and what Jess will be speaking about at the 2022 Customer Service Revolution Conference. Now here's your host, John DiJulius.
Hello, revolutionaries, and welcome to another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast. And today I am delighted to have Jess Pettitt. Did I say that right, Jess? Okay, good. Woo! Author and keynote speaker and guru of all things diversity and inclusion, which she's going to explain. Welcome, Jess.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Was that the right title, Jess? I mean, I just kind of made it up because of your background and stuff. Good, because I am the one that's going to learn the most. And Jess, you are in Northern California today. That's home?
Northern California. I live in Eureka, California. Where the hell is that? That's about 7 hours from San Francisco, Sacramento, and Portland, right on the coast. So I can't complain about my internet connection because I live on a cliff on the ocean.
And you have to take 3 flights anywhere?
We actually have
a boat?
An airport here for history nerds. We have an airport here to practice flying in and out of fog during World War II, and it flies directly to Denver, San Francisco, and LA.
Wow, directly. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, Jess, before we get into this, and I'm really, really curious because this is a topic I need to know a lot more, and I'm naive and I live in a bubble, which probably too many of us do, and I'm not proud of. So, but give our listeners a background of who Jess is and how she got where she is today as a sought-after keynote speaker, author, and I know you were, and still are, but I know you're a stand-up comedy, and you've done so much. So tell us, how did you get here? How did you get on the Customer Service Revolution podcast, which is your pinnacle of your career?
It is the peak. I mean, Shep hiking is
downhill now.
It's downhill from here, I think, basically. Yeah. So let me enjoy the moment while I can.
Yes.
So the Cliff Notes is I'm originally from Texas, and I started working primarily as a college administrator when I got out of graduate school from South Carolina. In those administrative jobs, I worked primarily with students, faculty, or staff based on their kind of identities and what programs they were using, social or educational programs. But I eventually would point out how the university itself was not a good steward in the neighborhoods where the buildings were or weren't serving all of the students, faculty, staff equally, which meant I got fired a lot. Because you'd fire me, go hire somebody else. I'd go to another university, get another job, do the same thing over and over and over again. Until after the third time of being fired, I've had enough therapy to realize I am a common denominator. So I eventually started my own business doing training, keynoting, consulting specific to diversity, equity, and inclusion is what we call it now. I'm old, so this was back in the 2000s, the aughts, as we like to refer to them. So I've been traveling around as a speaker, primarily in education, and then switched because people started asking me to work in hospitals, corporate associations, around people getting along together, or more importantly, people not getting along together. What does that mean? So I do a lot of work with toxic people, toxic workplaces, trying to build up the skills that we all have. So I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself, but I believe we have very challenging conversations with people we like and respect, and we don't have challenging conversations with people we don't like and don't respect. So we already have the skills. We just need to learn how we decipher or discern the two different buckets. That's basically my job. Plus, I like travel and cheese. So that works.
Cheese?
Cheese. I'm a big cheese fan. It's true.
What kind of cheese?
Yes.
What kind?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Any kind.
I am a connoisseur of the melty versions, and I have great respect for the crumbly kinds.
All right. Very good. So wait, you skipped the best part, the comedic part. You were a stand-up comic.
Yeah, I inserted a joke about cheese, though. See,
that was funny. That was funny.
That's suspense, John. So while
that was your day job. No, what was your? Oh no, that was your evening job.
Yeah. So I worked at NYU and then started doing stand-up at night, mostly as therapy because of my job. And it was during a presidential election year. So then they kind of needed a nobody to MC the Democratic Party fundraisers that were at rich private party houses and stuff. So I started doing that. So I got to MC with like very big name comedians because I was the
like who? Name drop.
I'm not a big name dropper, usually out of guilt. But George Carlin, Robin Williams, Chris Rock.
Oh my God.
Most of them are passed away now. Chris Rock was kind of unknown at the time. I was pretty much the only woman. Paul Reiser was kind of rising. No pun intended. Seinfeld.
Right.
Bob Goldthwait. Like, I'm old, right? So
I loved Robin Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Did you get to meet him?
Oh yeah, regularly. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
You were on a first name basis with him?
I mean, I was then. So
yeah,
same.
I don't think you are now, but then like, what'd you say, Rob? Hey, Rob, what would you call him?
Robin. Yeah,
Robin?
George. Mm-hmm. They were the common denominators in all of the shows, but again, I was kind of a nobody. But I did eventually. This is if we fast forward to my job now, probably the most culminating experience in me developing the ability to speak or do training or improv was eventually I got like cool enough that I would go to this Chinese food restaurant with all these folks. And after they would do their sets at night, they would come in the back door of this Chinese food restaurant and we would all wordsmith jokes. And so like just being able to be in a space where like I picked up my dog is being replayed 160 times by these comedic geniuses. Probably the highlight was one day Bob Newhart came. And again, I just shut up. It's one of the few times in my life that I shut up. But I got to listen to all of the history and experience going through the wordsmithing. So even like, because you're a Robin Williams fan, when I emceed the first lesbian show in New York, we had a like green light for go, red light for get off the stage. Your time's almost up, and a purple light, which literally meant shut up. Someone famous has walked in the door. And it was right around the corner from Letterman's studio. So Robin came in one time. This is the very first time I ever saw him in person, and got off the stage immediately. Robin Williams gets the stage and he gets to practice what he's going to do on Letterman. And he's sweating and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I like hurried up my show, raced back to Brooklyn to watch the Letterman show on television. And he did exactly the same things. Like a true professional looks impromptu, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Also a huge learning lesson. Like you don't just get up there and ramble because you think you're funny. It's disrespectful to the audience. So really practicing and really understanding what you're doing and why you're doing it is a gift of comedy to the audience, right? It might not work, but bombing or things like that are all learning lessons to get better. All of this was really great fodder and practice. Now that I'm like a full-time keynoter, I still use a ton of comedy.
Oh, I mean, you have such an advantage. You know, I when people ask me about they want to become aspiring speakers, I'm like, watch comedians, right? You never see a comedian with PowerPoint, right? But their storytelling, like you're there, you're in the bar when you spilled the drink all over the biker with tattoos. And, it's like, you're right there and you're like holding your breath. What's going to happen next? So that's so cool. Is your picture up anywhere? Like at a diner? That's what I thought. Or the Chinese place?
No, I don't even remember the name of the Chinese food place, to be honest, but I have a montage reel of my kind of naive set over and over again while I'm in New York. It's on my YouTube channel. You're welcome to check it out.
All right.
It is not safe for work. But no, I wasn't ever a thing enough to be up on the wall. And it's not pre-internet, but it's pre-internet being in our pockets. So the whole thing really does, I don't mean to like get all vulnerable, but it's a really weird thing to have a memory that there aren't a lot of living people that have the memory to share with. I was also like a raging alcoholic. I've been sober for 18 years now. And most of my counterparts in those memories either still struggle with addiction or died largely because of them. I think that's part of the reason I don't always name drop, because I kind of have some survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot. My parents died when I was young, and I think whether they know it or not, they kind of became parental figures in my life. And I want to make people proud, right? I want to be proud of my own work, and I want them to be proud of what I've learned from them. So that kind of extends out to that circle.
So you probably explained this, but how did you land on diversity? Because of your background of getting fired? Like, why did you become, this subject matter expert on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which after you answer that, then you got to tell me what that means. Because what I think of diversity, equity is all right, make sure we're including everyone, right? People of color and LGBT, screw that up. And, make sure we're, not discriminating for any reason. I know there's blind spots, which, it is good to not even realize that you're not including people. But first, tell me why you went down to become the subject matter expert, and then tell me what the hell it all means and what I don't know about it.
Sure. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a 7-hour podcast.
Right.
I will do this as cleanly as I can.
Yeah.
I don't want to not answer your questions, right? But there's actually very easy answers, so I'm going to do all of that at the same time, if that's cool.
Okay, please.
So first off, how I got into this is I think I was really fortunate that I was raised by black sheep. For anybody from Texas, I am a mixed family, meaning that my mother was an Aggie and my dad was a Longhorn. So that is already like, what? All my grandparents were Southern Baptist. Both of my parents were atheists. My mother started the teachers union in Texas. My dad was a professional athlete. Is a weird mix of people, right? And that weirdness, like the ability to fly your freak flag, I'm assuming was a mantra in my parents when they decided to become parents. So I do not recall any moment in my life where I was supposed to do something because that's what everyone else was doing. And I have created an entire brand, which is a very weird way of also saying like authentic sense of self, that I do whatever the hell I want to do, right? And COVID really showed me that I've designed this life of mine that's basically everything I love to do. Great. So having a little fear of the topics that you get nervous about, right? I was like, oh, this makes you nervous? I'm just going to go study it now. I remember my very first research paper. I'm a nerd, so I do a lot of research. I have a lot of education. My very first research paper in 6th grade, I did on sodomy laws because I didn't understand why heterosexual people could do sex acts based on pleasure, but homosexual people, at the time we used the word homosexual people couldn't. And why would anybody care? Get out of people's bedrooms. Isn't sex generally supposed to be private? That's the argument that I brought forth in 6th grade. Growing up in Texas, I was sent to the principal's office when I gave a paper presentation, and my parents applauded me and thought it was great. So then that principal didn't really know what to do about that. So that's just the support I was always given, right? So I never knew that I was picking a lane that was odd, because it was fascinating to me. Every topic had some like, well, this is hypocritical, well, why is this the case? So that was just fascinating, right? And I still am utterly
But
fascinated.
you were such a product of your environment, which is so rare, especially in Texas. I would never thought you were from Texas. I started stereotyping you when you told me you were from Texas.
Right. 100%. And I live in California now. Ugh,
Right.
like I can't even understand this, right? So like I grew up with guns, but they're hunting guns, right? So when I used to fly, most people, including me, depending, had a shotgun between my knees because we were off to go to a hunting trip. This was completely normal, right? So whatever we consider normal and what is normalized. So if I have a question, I go and research and find the answers. I don't use the internet or Wikipedia. I actually go to a library and flip sheets of paper, or at the time, microfiche or something. So I have great respect for history, but to respect history, you really have to be humble enough to realize we as a collective, humans, have not learned many lessons. We just keep repeating them over and over and over again. So that's kind of what's drawn me to the work in Canada. Okay. Now to the second part, what the hell is it and what is going on? I think it's important that whenever I do my trainings, I always start off with people have different definitions of what they are responsible for and what they're going to do about it, right? So I believe I am responsible for 7 generations ahead of me, 7 generations behind me, people I will never meet. That's my operational definition. So then what do I do with my agency when I have that scope of responsibility? Some people just believe they're responsible for their immediate family. Maybe the neighbor on the left because they like them, but they don't like the neighbor on the right. But you get to define your bubble of responsibility. Now, once you've done that, recognizing the bubble of responsibility that you operate with, whatever that is, not everybody experiences life exactly the same way as you. Right? Like, some people get fired. Some people I'm very open about being fired because that seems to be like a big secret in a lot of people's lives. But there's different ways our life is experienced by virtue of being different people. Like you mentioned at the beginning, you have more than one son. Every single one of your sons has grown up in the same house and is probably a unique person, right? They're going to have different lives. They're also going to have very similar lives. Both can happen at the same time.
Right.
So regardless of what we're calling it these days, because the language kind of changes and evolves, right now, to be called diversity, equity, and inclusion, you said yourself that it's really just about including everyone. But to include everyone, you don't necessarily do that in an equality way. That's kind of, I use the word equity instead of equality, because people have different wants and needs. So I use the example of shoes. So I wear a size 11 woman's shoe. That is a very large shoe for a woman. If I were to go and buy you, John, a pair of glitter Vans, slip-on Vans, because I am a Gen Xer and I love me a slip-on van. If I were to buy you a size 11 slip-on van, I love that. But that might not be your shoe size. That might not be the kind of shoe you like, right? So the golden rule is to treat everybody the way you want to be treated, which is a good starting place, but not everybody wants to be treated my way. So then when we get to equity, to include everyone, you actually have to engage in a pesky conversation and find out what do other people want or need. And then do you have the resources to do that? Sometimes the answer is no. That's okay. But now you know it's no. And sometimes the answer is yes. And then you can offer whatever resources you have. That's the overview. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.
Yes. And so is diversity, equity, inclusion more of, and it may not be either or, but it might be both or all the above. Is it more of showing me my blind spots as a leader, as a human being, as a company, whatever that looks like, or educating me to be less narrow-minded, ignorant, poor choice of words, but to look at people equally and not be, the broad brush stroke of, oh, she's from Texas or she's from California or she is, or, all that stuff. Is it both or is it leaning one more way towards the other?
It's a smart question. And I think most people would answer it's both. And my answer probably more functionally is whatever keeps you in the conversation, that's the answer. because I don't want anyone to feel disinvited. So, like, I get called in my work the white guy whisperer, and largely I think it's because I allow people to feel competent and invited into the conversation no matter where they're starting from. But if we can't get people into the conversation, then it doesn't matter what education I'm spouting if I don't have willing students. But I need willing students because I am also a student.
But if you have willing students, let's say I bring you into my company and we got some things to fix.
Sure.
Yes, help you with the blind spot. But I got some people that need to, that's not a willing student, right? If I'm bringing in to coach my people who I think are whatever, like a major National Football League owners, or, you know, all these people that clearly have a pattern, those aren't willing students, are they? Can we move the ball on them?
Yeah, I do not believe that everybody's interested, for sure. But I don't think you have to go to the NFL. I think you can go to any group of humans.
Yeah.
Any group of humans, there are people who are absolutely not interested in doing anything new or different. Okay.
Or I believe, and tell me if I'm wrong, I will to, not me, but they will to check a box, but that's the only reason why they're doing it. So they don't get.
Like, okay, let me put it this way. So there are adults, like functioning adults with jobs and access to money that eat chicken fingers pretty regularly for dinner.
Right.
It does. Okay, knock yourself out. It does not matter how much you tell somebody how good anything else on a menu might be. If they're chicken finger people, they're chicken finger people. Now, I don't mean the occasional, like, oh, this sounds good. There are people who, as functioning adults with access to money, only eat chicken fingers. Okay. They are clearly not interested in learning about the special, right? You can talk to them about a hollandaise sauce that's made from scratch. They don't care. It's not a chicken finger and barbecue sauce. I'm asking, until they could get sued for only eating chicken finger. Now, once a week, they're going to order, something off a different menu to check the box, right? To prevent. I understand the questions, right? But you have to back up a little bit. So
okay.
I don't approach the person who's only interested in chicken fingers, that forcing them to eat eggs Florentine is not helpful. That is not educational. I will not do mandatory programming. I disqualify more leads than I do accepting them because I think the motivation is in the wrong place. I'm not wallpaper. I'm not a throw pillow, right? And it feels gross. So I get to pick and choose who I work with. So when you're talking about checking a box or mandatory trainings or what I kind of call bullshit work, is like, oh yeah, we did that once, check. That's not solving anything. And if anything, it's allowing other people to see that you, on some minor level, acknowledge that there is a situation here and X is the solution, and you're going to fake it. You're like publicly faking it. That's disgusting. So I don't do that, right? I have plenty of work of people who are not doing well or who are failing, but they're not publicly faking it. I'd rather work with them than with people that make it look really successful. Let's take Nike as an example. Capitalism is very, very strong, right? I think that's assumption number 8 in this podcast interview. So Nike created a fund and a shoe and all this stuff to support Kaepernick, I always say his name wrong, Kaepernick, for kneeling, right? Like freedom of speech and police brutality and all this. So liberals go nuts by all these Nikes. Great. And then Nike takes some of its corporate funds and actually supports the Republican Party. That's how money works, right? So until you notice those systems, I think you're kind of delusional and naive. So back to the top of the question, when I work with organizations, there are always a Todd and a Barbara who are not interested. Great. Then, grab a muffin and you go back to your office, right? The people who are interested have a lot of work to do. I think the hardest thing for leaders or organizations or supervisors or managers or whatever is that for you to truly do what you say you want to do, you are going to have to fire people. They don't want to fire people because usually, somehow, karmatically, the people that would need to be fired are the ones that bring in the most money.
Right.
So then they don't know how to do that, right? Or they are, they're good people. Okay, great. But it goes the other way too, that when I do a lot of work in the medical industry, and a lot of nurses or doctors or something will ask like, well, I don't believe in this. So how am I supposed to do my job if I don't believe in this particular health provided service or this particular kind of person? And the answer is go get a new job. That's the answer. But that's not a functional answer for people who don't have the confrontation skills to have the challenging conversations about specifically in the medical world, like you are here to do no harm, not to do no harm on some people. Like that's not what the job is, right? Like if I owned a car wash, you can state that like we do not work on convertibles, but you can't actually cause scratches or damage. It's metaphors getting really bad as the car wash and stay in business.
Right.
Because that's not what a car wash is supposed to do. You're supposed to come out with a car in the same condition, if not better, when you exit the car wash. Right? Like it's the same premise. So then my approach to being able to include people or invite people into this conversation is to meet them where they're at, which drives people on both extremes nuts. Yeah. Because they don't want to meet people where they're at. They just want them to get caught up as quickly as possible.
Spend 2 days with John and other world-class experience leaders as we learn the best ways to build experiences that attract loyal customers and employees. The Customer Service Revolution Conference takes place live in Cleveland, November 7th and 8th. Visit customerservicerevolution.com to get your tickets today.
Well, so that leads me to my question I've always wanted answered. I don't know if it's answerable, but you'd be the person that I have come across that maybe has the most experience. It's such a crazy question. At what point is it the person's fault for the way they believe, right? And so, I just look at the way people are and they're brought up in the household, and maybe it's in my household, right? Where I'm always telling my kids something, and then the confirmation bias, every time the news comes on and, someone's in it that I'm prejudiced against, I'm like, see. And so now they're 18, they're 21, and it's been drilled in their head by everyone in their circle, their environment that I allowed them in. When does it become their responsibility?
So first answer, I'm not a parent. And so asking me for parental advice is not recommended by most people. I don't know the answer, but not because I'm not a parent. And the reason why I say I don't know the answer is that I know some very young people who have a very clear sense of their agency. They know what they want to do in the world, and they are not afraid of stepping out and doing that. I also know some very mature adults who still have to be led around because they actually don't have a sense of self yet to know those things. So I don't think it's age specific, which is why I usually start at responsibility and agency. There are people who have wildly different politics than me, who are far more politically involved than me, on all sides of all issues that are older and younger than me. But I'm responsible for me and what I'm doing, right? So and not even all the time. Like my mantra is do the best you can with what you've got some of the time. It's better than nothing, right? So I don't know. I would imagine if I have 3 dogs, you have 3 sons, I imagine there's some correlation.
Yes.
But they all have their own personalities and they all pick and choose what they want to do, right? So we are, as 3-dog mama over here, we are in a constant conundrum that Leo, who is my little cuddle bunny, he will pee on the open door to the backyard, right? Like the door is open. You can go in the backyard and go to the bathroom where you can. Why would you pee on the door? Right? And not to compare humans to canines, but there's some applicability.
Yeah.
I have no idea why he does that, but he does that. So then work with what you've got instead of what you should have or not to have. Just work with what you got.
But where I was probably going with it more is you see some horrible, heinous crime by a 23-year-old, right? And it could be racism caused. And this is just me pontificating, but it's like, did he have a chance? right? Because of the environment he grew up in, that people with, red nail polish were evil people and they needed to be put in their place. So that's kind of more of like, what? Yeah.
Like Greta Thunberg was like 13 when she became a global icon for climate change, right? Like, what? Or if we look at school shootings, a lot of times the loudest voices of survivors of a school shooting are the same age of the people who did the shooting. What's the difference? I don't know, but I do believe that it's rooted in what you feel responsible for and what you choose to do with the agency of what you feel responsible for.
Yeah.
That's the question at the base. And a lot of us, I'm almost 50 years old, and I don't know that
You're a baby.
I know, I try. I have good skin. I don't know that I have fully grasped what I'm capable of doing with my agency, and my definitions of responsibility ebb and flow as I begin to pay attention to other things. Sometimes they get really insular, sometimes they don't. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I think this is a good kind of both answer.
Yeah.
It's probably getting frustrating for listeners at this point. But if you go to a function and there is pizza, there are more people than there are pizza slices. Some people will say, oh my gosh, the pizza's going to run out, and they grab 3 pieces. Some people say, oh my gosh, the pizza's going to run out, and they take 1 piece. What makes someone fundamentally grab 3 or 1 pieces? The only answer I can think of is experience.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I get it. One of my favorite quotes I've come along, which is so hard to do, is listen like you're wrong. Right. And in the world we're living in today, of every topic is divisive. Right. It could be guns. It could be obviously politics, vaccination, COVID. I mean, every topic just sends people off. And even if I find someone that agrees with me, typically listen like you're wrong is like, usually we're like you're saying something I totally disagree with, and I'm so angry and I'm not listening to what you're saying. I just want you to come up for air so I can tell you why everything you just said was 100% incorrect versus, there might be something there. And then even on the flip side, what I try to do is when someone is totally, I guess, with me on with the way I think, then I try to play as devil's advocate, because we might, it is our blind spots. But all right, let's start the podcast.
Can I say this, John?
Yeah,
I think that's a beautiful takeaway for listeners is, can you listen some of the time as if you are wrong? And paying attention, taking responsibility for like, nope, not in this case. Okay, good to know about yourself. Or like, yes, in this case I can. I would add, can you practice, if you're practicing listening as if you're wrong, can you also practice asking questions that you legitimately do not know the answers to?
Right.
Because if you legitimately don't know the answer, you are going to listen as if you're wrong because you weren't right in the first place.
Instead of asking questions that I'm dying to answer. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for doing the takeaways, because I'm supposed to do that, and I'm clearly not doing that. But no. All right. Listen, you say to thrive in this world, you have to ride 2 horses at once. What does that mean?
Texan, can't help it.
I'm allergic to horses.
Let's go with metaphorical horses.
Okay.
2 goldfish. So 1 goldfish is ego and 1 goldfish is humility. And I think we need external validation, other people, friends, to tell us when we have been on the wrong one too long. So I'll take humility first. We all have friends or moments in our own life, whether it's fraud or imposter syndrome or something, where like we're playing too little. We're learning, we're open to learning. Those are all really important things, like to be able to listen as if you don't know, ask questions you don't know the answers to. There's a humility piece to that that's really important. But if you only live there, it's very hard to take a risk. It's very hard to sell yourself. It's very hard to stand up for something you believe in if you're like, I don't know, I should probably do more research. But doing the research is also important. So if other people are like, hey, get up, let's go, right? Like then you probably have spent too much time on that goldfish. As a solopreneur, this is the goldfish that I need to learn and to get better, or to adapt what I'm doing to a new audience, or when I'm doing consulting work, I come in with all of my experience and listen as if I know nothing, right? Like that takes a lot of humility.
Yeah.
It's paired with the other goldfish because the other goldfish is the confident ego agency one, right? So again, as a solopreneur, this is where I'm closing deals, writing copy for my website, right? Like I am a baller. Boom. Over here. Boom. And if you spend too much time there, your friends leave because that is a very annoying person.
Right.
You have to balance between the two.
Right. No, I love that. I love that. And I'm guilty of that. I'm very narrow and deep, which I think is what made me successful. But I don't like to get out of my lane because I don't like to be dumb. Right. And that's why I live on a golf course. I've never played golf. Why? Because I hate sucking. And everyone's going to have the suck phase. And I don't want to suck, but that limits me. Right.
Yeah. John, this is probably, I'm going to save you a copay in therapy.
Yeah.
At the beginning of this year, I was a ceramics minor in college. That's important. That was in the 1900s. So at the beginning of this year, I took a ceramics class. And there's a part of me that was like, clearly all of this is just going to come back to me.
Right.
Because it's clearly in there, but I have not touched a ceramics wheel since 1995. So I'm in this class for 6 weeks. I did not successfully pull anything up on the wheel, center, nothing, nothing to show for 6 weeks. And it was seriously the most liberating experience because I caught myself expecting for this to come back and to be like an Olympic ceramicist in competition with my other hippies in my neighborhood. And instead, I couldn't figure out if I was left-handed or right-handed after 6 weeks. It was one of the most important things I think I've done coming out of COVID times to remember that I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And even if I did know it once, it doesn't mean it's in there.
You think about quitting?
Several times.
Yeah.
I'm a goody two-shoes, and I even skipped some classes because it was so unmotivating to be terrible at something.
Right.
But after
and that's a great point just as a leader, because I always say our newest employees are our dumbest employees, and no fault of their own. You don't know where the bathroom is. You don't know our terminology. If we've trained you, it's with a fire hose. You couldn't comprehend. And so what you just did, put yourself back in the shoes of a new employee who's scared shitless. Everyone's looking at them. Who the hell's he or she? And, what job is there to do? And then we snap at them because they can't help us today because they don't know anything. That's cool. Right. That's cool.
And back to this kind of both answer, that's the theme of this podcast, is that your newest employees also are not deeply steeped in the culture or customs or norms of your organization. So there's a moment where they would have the most innovative ideas.
Yep.
They would see the most inefficiencies. They'd be able to identify those weak marks, but we don't listen to them because they don't even know the bathroom code.
Right.
But they eventually learn the bathroom code in exchange for losing any outsider perspective.
Right. No, you're 100. And that's why we have jobs as consultants, because we come in with that. But as you just said, we have great consultants that are working for us in the first 90 days. Why do we need a bathroom code? Well, we just do. We've always needed a bathroom code. Why? Yeah. All right. What is Good Enough Now, which is the title of your awesome book? It's the title of your presentation at this year's Customer Service Revolution Conference that you're keynoting. Tell us, what does Good Enough Now mean?
The idea of Good Enough Now is doing the best you can with what you've got some of the time. So I'm not talking about like orthoscopic surgery, right? Like get the right knee. But generally speaking, when we start talking about moments where we are intimidated, fearful, scared, whatever word you want to use to try, what do we do? How do you build momentum when momentum is completely stopped or stifled?
Yeah.
What I say is trying is sometimes really hard. So then you try to try, right? It might not solve it, but at least it's the right activity. Trying to try can also be very trying. And so then you don't want to do it sometimes. And then you have to do it again, right? That's the idea of Good Enough Now, is the assumption that we currently have what we need to do a decent to good job occasionally right now. We don't have to be a soaring eagle of exceptionalism 1,000% of the time. And that usually is intimidating. Similar to your golf story, my ceramics experience, right? Like, I don't play golf because I have very limited eye-hand coordination. I love golf because I like driving little cars. And I think that the landscaping is kind of magical, especially if you go to a golf course in Arizona. There's not that much green until you're on a golf course. I am also horrified by golf because that's a lot of water use for a sport. I am also amazed by golf because there's a lot of math and usually alcohol at the same time, right? Go Scottish.
Right.
Shout out to
Robin Williams.
Probably the best set ever on the
best
history
skit ever.
Yeah. So all of those things can be true at exactly the same time. So then what are you going to do with them? And the idea is to internalize being good enough now, do the best you can, what you got some of the time.
All right. So what can our attendees expect to learn from you at the November's Customer Service Revolution? In your keynote.
November 22 is right after the election. So it'll probably be part therapy for at least a third of the room. A third of the room will have no idea an election happened because they don't care about politics, similar to how I feel about most sports.
Come on. That's not fair.
That's what I would say about you raising your hand about not caring about politics. Yeah. There's actually, I don't know if it's appropriate to tell this story, but the Cubs, are you familiar with the Cubs?
The Cubs beat the Cleveland Indians at the time in the World Series a few years ago. Thank you.
Okay, well, I might be bringing up that exact memory. So my favorite hamburger milkshake place in Phoenix said that they would give away free hamburgers and milkshakes if the Cubs ever won whatever their big game is.
It was 2016. Oh, you're killing me.
Right. The Stanley Cup, as I like to refer to it. So I'm there for the burgers and the milkshakes. So I'm standing in line with people who are going down Cubs history and lore, and there's something about a goat. I wanted a Baby Ruth. I don't know anything that's happening.
Right.
Yeah. Where's my milkshake? Free milkshakes? I'm in line. That's how that works. And I realized in that moment that this is how people feel when I go completely deep research on like House bills on a state level or congressional bills that are pending on a federal level. Some people are there for the milkshakes. Some people are into what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I still don't follow sports. My dad was a professional athlete and it burned.
What did he play?
Powerlifting and bodybuilding, so not a lot of playing, but
yeah.
A lot of food related disordered eating things and fake tans, lots of fake tans.
Fake tans, body shaving or whatever, waxing. I don't know what was ever popular.
I grew up with all of this, which I didn't know was odd until college. That I grew up with like Arnold Schwarzenegger taught me how to play chess. I didn't know that was weird. That's my dad's friend. Anywho's, I burnt out on this competitive sport that is really cruel to your body. Why do you spend this much time to do it? But in order to spend time with my dad, I became a judge because that's who I am. Anyway, the point is that not everybody cares about what you care about. And a great place of empathy is recognizing that, John, you and I can still have a conversation, even though I brought up a very sore spot to you.
Yeah,
I'm very sorry.
Yeah.
Can have empathy for you. And if I were to go off about politics, you would probably just drink a milkshake.
Yes, something. I drink something. So back to the revolution. You're going to humor us. You're going to entertain us. You're going to educate us. What are some takeaways that we will get?
I didn't mean to be too off subject, but that's really what
I finally met someone that is almost as ADD as I am.
The idea is that the folks in the audience or the participants will be able to pick a person or a topic that they are nervous about having a conversation about. They don't have to share it with anybody else, be it sports, politics, or maybe you don't even like milkshakes. I don't know. You get to talk about whatever you want to inside the comfort of your own mind. And I will literally walk people through where we get tripped up most often in the conversations we know we need to have, but we're not having. That's a conversation that matters.
What about something I want to know is, after I listened to this podcast or had this interview, what can I do as a self-audit of what my blind spots might be? I might be pretty confident, kumbaya, I love everyone. But how do I know where I can make better progress?
Super smart question. You can do this on an individual or an organizational lens, doesn't matter. The first step of inclusion is to determine who are you excluding. So if you need to, pretend you are going to open up your house to a dinner party. Are there neighbors that you are going to invite to this dinner party primarily on a date or a time that you know they are unavailable, so you get the credit for inviting them, but thank God they didn't come? Yes, we all
That's
have
checking the box. That's checking the box I was talking about.
We like to call it a Southern invitation. When you know who you are, I'm probably getting a little advanced here, but when you know who you are consciously excluding, you can then begin to do work on who you are unconsciously excluding. Then you can do work on who you are consciously including and unconsciously including. So even if we take the whole lineup, John, that you've put together, which are amazing, incredible speakers, like when I originally got the invitation, I was like, me? Are you kidding? Right? Like, this is a very powerful lineup, and then I will do the dishes, I guess. So when you looked at the lineup, though, whether you know it or not, you had probably a conscious qualifications in order to get into the possible pile, but you probably had an unconscious feeling about other people that got them in or didn't. Like, I mean, if there are people who are recommended by people that you deeply respect, you might not even have to watch their video.
Correct.
Right? There are other people that you're like, I'm going to check some references on this person, right?
Right.
We make discernment. The word discrimination has a really bad rap, but you can't have every single person on your panel. You're going to have to, at some point in time, tell somebody no. Same thing about attending the event. You can't just open the doors to every living human on the globe. There's not enough chairs. So how do you pick and choose who gets to come?
Well, and what I like about your topic and what I'm learning and what I believe we're all going to learn is it could be the obvious stuff of, are we, as business leaders or, social, are we filtering unconsciously, right? Who we let in, who we invite into our business as customers or employees, but even to another degree, subconsciously, am I losing employees because I'm not recognizing what is important to them? And, back to the milkshake or whatever, no one likes milkshakes. Therefore, we're never going to have milkshakes because I think that.
The answer across the board is absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So the Cliff Notes answer is become more conscious of what you are unconscious of. Holy shit. What does that even mean? Can I do something else? Right? Like, that's why I have job security, is that people are like, no, thank you. There's a reason I'm unconscious to it. But when you talk about the language you used was identifying blind spots, identifying them is the first thing. Then you get to decide to keep it or change it. And if you want to keep it, that's fine, but it's no longer blind. Now it's consciously a decision about you. Right? I have a rule breaker, deal breaker, and that is I do not do lying. And you can lie about the pettiest, stupidest thing, but you end up in a different column in my world, and you cannot get out of that column. That's a pretty weird thing to not know that was true about me until I was deep into my 30s. Now, warning label, I'm almost 50. You lie to me or to anyone else, no matter how big or small, you're out. Out. Like, you're just, that I am conscious of this, and it has served me well. So I know why I'm doing it. I know why I'm conscious of it, and it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else.
It's your non-negotiable.
Right. It's a non-negotiable. It's absolutely a non-negotiable. It's a complete deal breaker. But for 30 years, I didn't know that about myself. Now, what that says to other people possibly is that I'm likely not a liar. Now, do I lie? Sometimes, because it's really awkward to be 100% honest 100% of the time.
Like, honey, do I look fat in these jeans? What's the proper response?
That's an example. Do you want to look fat in those jeans? Like, what are you aiming for here, right? Like,
the correct answer is no, you look great, honey. Yeah.
I'm not married to a woman.
Right. I found out the hard way. Just a little bit. Okay. Jess, thank you so much. So my personal vision, which goes back to something you said earlier about the next 7 generations behind and forward. My personal vision is to live an extraordinary life. And that's not the important part. It's the next part. So countless others do. And that's kind of where you're going is, it's not so I have more cars, houses, vacations, bank accounts, all that. It's, I believe we all have a responsibility, not an opportunity, but a burden to live the best version of ourselves. So the ripple effect, and you go back to whoever, Nelson Mandela, Walt Disney, all the greats. What if they just said, screw it. I'm going to be average. I'm going to be ordinary, right? How different would our lives be? Your parents, whoever our people were in that life that now allowed us. So I really love that. You were billed by people I respect like Shep Hyken, that you are an awesome person besides an awesome speaker. And that's really important to me. And you are. I am going to include in the show notes a link to your website, a link to your books, Amazon or your website. Which is a better link?
Either one, or you can even go to, the kids these days use Linktree. So you can go to flamingo.day and you can buy a book directly from there, as well as connect to all of my social things if you...
That's what I wanted to know. What else? So if I just do flamingo.day?
Flamingo.day.
They'll get everything?
All in one place. Look at that.
Oh, mic drop. All right. Awesome. Anything else you need me to include? Your comedy reel? That's inappropriate?
Include that. It is not safe for work, so I like to warn people. And maybe Robin Williams' whole thing on golf courses. Just
oh my God. Yes. That is the best. YouTube. Okay. Jess, I appreciate you so much. Thank you. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for, helping me sort this out in my own mind, because I think it is so critical today for all of us. We didn't get to the stale mail frail thing, but, next time, or maybe
we'll save it for November.
Right. I appreciate you, Jess. I really do. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution podcast and our conference this year.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thank you, Revolutionaries, for another episode of the Customer Service Revolution podcast, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Service Revolution podcast with John DiJulius. Did you enjoy this episode? Consider leaving us a review. We value your feedback and love to hear how you're using the podcast in your organization. To hear more, be sure to subscribe now on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for being part of the Customer Service Revolution.